At Old Trafford on Saturday at 3 p.m, Manchester United host Brighton. The big news coming out of Old Trafford at the moment is, of course, Jadon Sancho. He's been banished from the first team after he refused to apologise to Erik Ten Hag.
Are you going to apologise to Erik? Are you going to apologise to Erik?
Yeah. Well, I have in a way.
You don't see a lot of banishments these days, do you?
You don't, Jim,
No.
do you? I mean, it follows his social media post after the Arsenal defeat where he said he'd been made a scapegoat for a long time at the club. He was then asked to apologise to Ten Hag and then he refused. Manchester United were willing to sell Sancho to a Saudi Arabian club before the deadline last week, but he refused to engage.
Which is kind of fair enough.
That. Yeah, it's up to him.
I would say there's a pattern emerging of players using social media to come out and complain about stuff. I don't necessarily have a problem with that in principle, but what I do think is the manager needs to be, the buck needs to stop with the manager.
Yeah.
And Erik Ten Hag, I mean, he won't be happy with how Man United have started the season, but he has given them a platform there to kind of really kick on after a lot of nonsense that's come before him. And I think one of the things that's been a hallmark of his regime so far has been, look, it's on me, and I'm the man to get rid of a Cristiano Ronaldo. I'm the man to send the players I want to pick.
Yeah.
And I understand he has to be like that. So I kind of totally sympathise with Sancho not wanting to go to Saudi Arabia. That's totally within his right at the age he is and the fact that he wants to play at a good level. I totally get that. But if he is going to come out and use his social media to complain about stuff that's happening internally at the club, he's obviously going to be punished for that.
No, but he feels as if he's been hung out to dry.
Well, he has been.
And if he's been spoken about in a certain way.
But he has been. But the
So-
point is, no player's bigger than
Look,
the club.
we need
That's
to
the
hear
problem.
from the Sancho side of this, which is obviously represented by the Dortmund-loving Andy Brassel.
Andy Brassel, exactly.
Andy?
Oh,
Well, I think the eventual conclusion is obvious, isn't it?
He's going to leave the club.
The fact that, he's not just going to leave the club. I think Edin Terzic gets binned as Dortmund coach. Probably Julian Nagelsmann comes in the medium term.
Little loan deal.
And he gets loaned back to Dortmund. I think that's what he wants to do.
Yeah, I find this whole Sancho and Ten Hag thing, it's a strange one because I think years ago the general feel was you'd always back the club and the manager over this, and you think this player is speaking out, he's being very, very silly. And clearly, but I think nowadays there's less of that. There's still a bit of that, of course, but nowadays people think, hang on, this is unfair on the player. And a player has a right to speak out.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think this situation is a little bit different from what we generally see when like the Damari Gray situation is a great example. When we see this sort of thing where a player speaks out about a manager or a club, this is slightly different because I do think Sancho is genuinely the aggrieved party here. I don't think it was fair of the club to so publicly hang him out to dry and not expect him to have his right of reply.
But then the thing is, though, Jim, that you see, we don't know what's been going on. If Sancho has been poor with his discipline, if they have tried, and Ten Hag has cut a figure of being pretty fair on those who aren't going to put
He's
in
a disciplinarian, isn't he? We know
disciplinarian,
that.
exactly, and we've seen the levels of performance at the club. The club is still a bit shambolic here and there. That's not Ten Hag's fault. You'd say largely Ten Hag's been playing his part.
He's swimming against the tide a bit.
Yeah,
isn't he?
he's not been perfect, but he's been certainly an
He's had a
improvement.
lot to deal with, isn't
A
he?
lot to deal with. And if he feels I'm this, one last throw of the dice, or maybe he genuinely thinks this could get a reaction because it has worked in the past with some players. I grant you, it's a lesser trodden path these days. Then perhaps one might have sympathy for the manager.
I do think though, if you try that and then that doesn't work, that's on you, and that's for the manager to deal with. But I think the issue is here, isn't it, that Sancho doesn't feel like he needs to apologise to Ten Hag. So they haven't got down to the business of actually sorting things out between them and clarifying it. So they need to keep talking this through. I would think they need to keep
I agree.
mediating.
And the way that United are approaching it, even if they never want to play him again, it's daft. Like
You
they're
devalue
just,
him.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
I do think that whoever side you fall against, down just airing your dirty laundry in public is never a good idea. And Ten Hag and Manchester United, they moved first on this.
Yeah, and also let's be honest, there's another massive story at United at the moment, and everyone's talking about this one. And that's, you wonder if that might even be convenient at the expense of Sancho.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going full Matt Letizia.
I was
Maybe.
about
Nice
to
to
say
see.
a little bit of conspiracy
Nice to
there,
see.
Jim. It's a Friday, feel your boots.
Can I perhaps just
Paul
offer
McCartney is dead.
the newest one you could think of?
All right, Avril Lavigne has been replaced.
I was going to say, that's before the moon landing. Before moon landing. Can I offer a slightly alternative opinion,
Yes.
which is perhaps going to be ridiculed, as sometimes becomes the custom? Jadon Sancho, talking of devaluing him and stuff like that, I mean, he has played quite a lot for Man United and hasn't really made
it's
an
not
impact.
It was an odd signing. It was an odd move. He was so good at Dortmund, of course. And going to Manchester United, I understand people say, well, maybe he wants to come back home to England and, they are a huge club and et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, Andy. I just thought it was a pretty weird one from the start.
It's a bit like Chelsea, isn't it? In that if you sign one player and he doesn't get anywhere near his potential, maybe it's the player. If you sign a load of players who don't get anywhere near their potential, it's probably the club. I think that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, it's just a long list. Pogba have a shit attitude,
Well, I mean, constantly in the spotlight for negative reasons, though, Andy Pogba.
Yeah,
that's unfair. I just think that was maybe a poor example you used there.
This is a whole can of worms, but
I think that there's a lot to unpick with Man United. I think in this particular case, if Erik Ten Hag wants to actually put United back on an even keel, and let's not forget they won a trophy last season, finished third in the Premier League, back up, and that's a reasonable improvement for a club of their size. Given what's happening elsewhere in the Premier League, that's the first trophy they won since Mourinho. Right, and he delivers them back into the Champions League. And he's shown last season, I don't think they've started the season very well, by the way, but they showed last season that if they build around him, he's the guy with the big enough personality and enough skills as a manager to make this happen. Regardless of whatever happens with Sancho, at a club like Man United, Ten Hag will be judged on his results. If they end up 10th come January, he'll probably lose his job. So if he's going to pick Alejandro Garnacho ahead of Jadon Sancho, despite Jadon Sancho costing a lot of money and Garnacho being a kind of academy player.
But that's fine.
That's on him. That's his decision. He's not going to realistically do that for any other reason. He doesn't think Sancho can do a job for him.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. The way you publicly treat people and the way you speak about people, that has an impact, not only just on the finances of the club, as Jim was talking about, but in terms of getting other players to come.
Initially, when that quote landed, it was like, oh, wow, he's saying he's been shit in training. But that's an inference from that phrase, isn't it? It isn't necessarily saying that. It's just like...
I think there's an opportunity for Sancho. I mean, look, the transfer window's shut now, so that's partly a problem, of course. But, I mean... Like I said, I don't want to come across as too old school, and I think players should have a voice and they should be able to kind of articulate how they feel. I think that's important. But ultimately, you're never going to win against the size of a club of Man United. You're just not going to win. And so if he genuinely thinks that there's a problem there and that the manager doesn't fancy him, doesn't like him, isn't going to select him no matter what he does, Jadon Sancho may be sitting there thinking, I've trained really well. What chance have I got? Then he needs to go to the club and say he wants to move. That's really the only thing he can do. He's not going to help the situation by saying the stuff he said publicly off the reservation. And don't forget, Roy Keane's fucking done that, and Roy Keane's a legend at the club, and he got moved on. Now, it's easy for them to be moving on because he was an older player and he wasn't improving and all the rest of it. But Man United need to understand the size of the club they are, and so they have to. I feel like they have to operate in a certain way.
If I may finish my point about how you can read those quotes as well, it could genuinely be read as, okay, he's not what we need for this game, for what we're planning in the next game. It could just be that Ten Hag has a very, very direct communication style. Perhaps it is sort of crossed wires and it's blown up into this huge thing with Sancho's statement, and they are just kind of... They're just at loggerheads now, aren't they?
Exactly.
Both thinking the other needs to apologise to the other, and it's going nowhere.
It's not about being in or out of the team. It's about the way you speak to people, and it's about the way you treat people. That's what it's about.
I mean, I suppose to chuck in a little extra something here, in December 2022, Ten Hag revealed in the press conference that Sancho would be unavailable for a period of time due to physical and mental factors as the attacker was battling injury. Manchester United didn't get clearance to mention his mental health struggles.
Yeah, and that's the crux of this, isn't it?
So I suppose, just bringing in that to the
that's fair enough. I didn't remember that, so that's fair enough.
Yeah. So we shall have to wait and see there. But I mean, something we can all agree on is wherever he plays. I mean, most likely at the moment, the Manchester United might not become January. We want Sancho playing because he's a phenomenal player and ridiculously talented.
Well, obviously, I think if Ten Hag knew that Sancho's got mental health issues which are affecting his performance, and he shouldn't have said the stuff he said.
But then you think about Klopp and Sturridge, and Klopp said a few things, and then he said at one point, he's like, yeah, but at some point, Daniel, you're going to have to buck your ideas up. You can't always be injured. You can't always, sometimes it's in his mind. And it was like, whoa, it was surprising he said that.
They've got to be careful managing those messages for sure.
Indeed.
Cheers for watching another fantastic clip from the Football Ramble podcast. Make sure you click like on this video and subscribe to the channel, which means you will not miss a single upload.